Let's talk about something really unique in the world of politics, nations that operate inside of another nation. That's the world of modern tribal governments. And as you're about to see, this status can lead to some pretty surprising, high-stakes conflicts.
So let's jump right in with a wild story from 2024. A major conflict blew up between South Dakota's governor and all 9 of the native nations inside the state. After she made some really controversial remarks, these nations did something pretty dramatic. They banned her from setting foot on their lands.
And that, of course, raises a huge question that gets right to the heart of what we're talking about today. Can they actually do that? Can a tribal government really ban a sitting state governor?
The answer is a big, clear yes. And figuring out the how and the why of that, well, that unlocks the entire story of how these governments work. It all comes down to a power they have held for centuries.
That power is rooted in one single fundamental concept: sovereignty. If you want to understand anything about tribal governments, you have to start right here.
Now, this is crucial. Sovereignty isn't something that was given to native nations. It's their inherent historic right to govern themselves. That means making their own laws, managing their own lands, and you guessed it, deciding who is and who is not allowed to enter them.
So you end up with this really unique relationship. Tribal governments are sovereign, but they also exist inside a pretty complex legal framework. They're subject to federal authority, but generally not state authority. And that creates this constant push and pull.
You know, this tension didn't just appear out of nowhere. It's got deep roots in history. To really get how tribal governments work today, we need to look back at a major turning point in the 1930s, a moment that was a response to decades of just devastating U.S. policy.
Get this, in the 50 years leading up to 1934, federal policies led to the loss of 90 million acres of tribal land. It was so bad that the federal government basically had to admit the incredible damage that had been done.
So the government's fix was something called the Indian Reorganization Act, or IRA. On paper, its goal was to reaffirm native sovereignty. But, and this is a huge but, it came with a massive catch, one that was based on this paternalistic idea that traditional native governments just weren't cut out for modern life.
And this created a profound clash of values. See, many traditional governments ran on consensus. You talk things out, you build agreement in the community. But the U.S. came in and imposed its own model: majority rule, where one side wins and the other side just loses. And this wasn't a suggestion. If tribes didn't adopt the U.S. system, their federal funding was often on the line.
All this historical pressure basically created a fork in the road, which led to the 2 main kinds of government structures we see today.
The first path is what we can call the modern structure, and it probably looks pretty familiar. It's modeled on the U.S. government, with 3 branches for checks and balances: an elected tribal council, an elected chairperson, and a tribal court system. This is a direct result of that IRA influence. But then there's the hybrid structure, which is this really creative blend of old and new. These governments might have elected officials working right alongside traditionally selected leaders. A fantastic example is how some Pueblo tribes have a general council that includes every single adult member, making sure that those traditional values of consensus and community still have a powerful voice.
Okay, so we've got the history, we've got the structures. But what does exercising sovereignty actually look like in the 21st century? Well, as you might guess, it often means facing some major hurdles.
For one, it can mean dealing with a total maze of federal bureaucracy. I mean, take something essential, like getting high-speed internet on a reservation. The money might be out there, but it's often split up between 7 different federal agencies, and each one has its own ridiculously complex application process. And sometimes exercising sovereignty isn't just about paperwork, it's an all-out battle. In 2016, the Dakota Access Pipeline got approved right near the Standing Rock Sioux's water supply. The key thing here? It was done without tribal consultation, a direct challenge to their sovereignty. The tribe sued, but they lost in court. The pipeline got built, but that fight is far from over. But not every fight ends that way. Sometimes asserting your sovereignty isn't about physical protest. It's about legal strategy. You know that old saying, paper beats rock?
Well, in 2019, the governor of Oklahoma tried to stop tribes from renewing their gaming compacts. So several tribes banded together and sued him, arguing his move broke the federal Indian Gaming Regulatory Act. And you know what? The federal courts sided with them. In this fight, the paper, the federal law, was the key to a major victory.
So we've seen sovereignty in the headlines, we've gone through the history, we've looked at the court battles. What's the real takeaway here for these nations today?
I think this is maybe the best way to look at it. Sovereignty isn't some dusty, static idea from a history book. It's an active power. It's like a muscle. The more tribal governments exercise their rights, the more they negotiate and fight for their interests, the stronger that muscle gets.
So from building infrastructure, to managing resources, to, banning a state governor, these are modern governments solving 21st century problems. They're constantly adapting and evolving, but they're doing it all while holding on to their core identity as independent, sovereign nations.
It's a complex, dynamic, and ever-changing reality, and it leaves us with one last big question to think about. In a world of hard borders and centralized power, what does it really mean to be a nation within a nation?